Good morning, everyone. I am moderator for the climate activity and national solidarity. My name is Hyun Soyoung, who is the Undersecretary General for People for Earth. And before we begin, I would like to give you a housekeeping remarks. Just like other session, we are providing simultaneous interpretation. Channel number 5 for Korean and channel number 6 for English. In this session, there are some people who are joining us from Zoom, and you can select your preferred language, either Korean or English. And now we are going to start the session number 7, and we've been talking about the value transition about climate actions, and based on that, we can think about how best we can have the international networking and how we can have the value transition in the climate activities in South Korea and focus more on the climate justice. We have 3 participants, and we have Oh Jihyuk from South Korea, from the Colorado border. From Earth Guardians, we have Marlow Baines, and the co-founder of the Sunrise Silicon Valley and the policymaker of the Zero Hour, we have the Jamie Minden. Mr. O has been working for the organization for the non-violent activities, and currently he is trying very hard to stop the export of the coal power plants of Korea. And in many areas, there are many people who are doing ecological genocide, and many people are making grassroots movement to make that as a international crime. So many of the Korean international activities are trying to make an international solidarity to bring about a better future. So this can be really meaningful to all of us. And Marlow will present the vision of the Earth's Guardian, and she's going to tell us about the leadership, and she has contributed a lot to make Earth's Guardian as a global NGO. And Marlow has become the speaker for the Global Summit for the 1% for the planet, and she published the Little Black Book, a young activist love story. And there's a love story of the young activist, and you can listen to her poetry in her presentation. Last but not least, I would like to introduce the Jamie Minden. Jamie is studying environmental science, and she's the co-founder of the Sunlight Silicon Valley, and she is the leader for the Monterey Bay Aquarium for the youth production. She is the host for Fridays for Future and policy advisor for Zero Hour. She started these activities starting from 14, and she's going to tell us more about grassroots movement and the strategy. And that's it from me. I would like to invite Mr. Oh Ji-hyuk, the climate activist trapped in South Korea, how we can make it expand to the global society. And today I'm going to tell you about the climate activities trapped in Korea. My name is Oh Ji-hyuk. So, climate crisis is something that we call that as a global issue. We say that we are all connected, we have a single planet. Yes, any societal issue can be a global issue. However, the climate issue can be related to the non-human creatures, so it can have a huge impact to our life. For example, the greenhouse gas can be emitted from any country, and anyway, we are going to get some impact. And many people criticize the export of the coal power plant to China, Vietnam. And if you are not building the coal power plant, and if you are simply exporting that, that's an issue. And based on that international viewpoint, we should do some activities. And let's say there are 1,000 coal power plants, and in South Korea, we turn off or plug off 60 coal power plants. In that case, can we be satisfied? I don't think that's the right thing. And we need to have a global viewpoint. That's why we need international solidarity. And how much international solidarity are we working on right now? And as an activist, the Sunrise Movement or with the resistance against the extinction, we've been working really hard. And there are some of the international organizations that we are working with. And are we really working with them? Maybe we are not working with them so closely. And we can analyze some of the activities and we can have some discussion with them. Are we in depth of our solidarity? No, it is not. Actually, we have the language difference and keeping the relations is not that easy. So based on that, I will tell you a little bit more about international solidarity. What is the definition of international solidarity? And we can have human resources exchanges and joint project among the stakeholders. The ecological activities are making changes within the Earth community. And in the context of the region and society, they have their own value. And I don't think joint project does not always mean international solidarity. International solidarity is the emotion to emotion. We can build a project and interaction together, and we're going to talk about the interrelations and the power relations at the same time. The international relations can be understood in two ways, state-to-state relations and social movement. Let's first talk about the state-to-state relations. There are power imbalance among the states. For example, there is a history about exploitation and too much emission. There are differences among the two countries, and based on that historic background, we should understand how to plug the gap. That is the beginning point of climate and ecological justice. There is a dynamics we should understand behind that. And there can be two more things to discuss. First, if we have the plant or the coal power plant, we can simply transfer our reduction responsibility to other countries. For example, we are building more power plants in the Vietnam or Indonesia. That can be the typical example. China is the factory of the world. What should we do? Second, there are some countries which is getting the biggest damage, but they are not responsible about the CO2 emission. Pakistan has a huge flood, and their 1/3 of their land has been flooded. How much are they responsible for the CO2 emission? Sometimes we may wait for the diplomatic solution, or should we do something because we need to have the solidarity with them because we need to build our discourse. And that is the challenge given to the social movement. We should understand each other and we should learn from each country's policies. That is the core of the social movement. When we are learning each other, we can build our social movement program. Manual, history, strategies can be shared. For example, the Sunrise Movement will tell us a lot, and we can simply take a look at the homepage. But internally, we can have in-depth discussion why the manual was created and how we can use that manual. For example, we have these kind of actions. We made such an action and how the response was made. That kind of information can be really useful. The global strike can be a typical example. All the countries, for example, on the 20 something in September, can go for a strike. because we have the same agenda. All the people are working in solidarity. All the people are working for the same agenda. We can make that as a bigger scale, as a bigger agenda. However, on the scene of the fighting, actually, that has been led by of the many of the Western countries. Latin America or other continents should be studied more and more because the detailed strategy later can form a larger strategy. I'm telling you, the Korean climate movement is trapped within Korea. Then why? I'm telling you, it is trapped within the Korean peninsula. However, actually, ecological peace has not been fully considered between the two Koreas, and we are trapped within South Korea. Let me expand our viewpoint a little bit. Sunrise movement has been most referred case in Korea. In the YCEA where I am working, and we came up with a new program and provided internal training. Wanted to invite international guests and we wanted to invite someone from Sunrise Movement, but we found out that they do not have any network with Sunrise Movement. Even though we are talking about Sunrise Movement, but we do not have any interaction with them. That is something that needs to be improved. So we are getting the information only via the news, so our understanding cannot be adequate enough. But of course, there were some solidarity examples. For example, the Tusan Ability is now building the coal power plant in Vietnam, and GIG, another youth group, is protesting against the coal power plant which will be built in Indonesia. Let me give you more cases from YCEA. And we were spraying with the green paint, and what you are doing is the greenwashing. I draw that in front of the Dusan building. We delivered a clear message. And we are on the criminal case and the civil case in the court. The core message is to stay away from coal power plant. But now, beyond that, we are talking about national responsibility and ecological discourse. The depth of the solidarity is not that high, but in the next year, we will pay a visit to Vietnamese site and listen to the voice of the local people. We will meet with the local activists to see what is really happening in Vietnam. We are going to observe and record, and we are going to produce the new discourse. In that process, the discourse we want to build is like this. The peace on the Vietnam is important. We are in solidarity with the peace movement of Vietnam. And we have the Vietnamese War and the Korean War. And based on the history of the war, we should rewrite our discourse about environmental protection. And why can we focus more on international solidarity? There are many obstacles. I'm going to introduce some of the obstacles. Currently, we are busy enough with local businesses. That's something that we should accept. We do not have the network, we have the language barrier. It is really daunting to monitor and keep it consistent. There are some realistic obstacles. I know it, and within the YCEA, and we understand that we have some internal confrontations. However, the biggest issue is because we did not have enough discussion why international solidarity is really necessary. And today, I'm suggesting international solidarity is really necessary, and I am proposing something new to you.
So let's move on to the question what we can do together. So The US and Australia, Vietnam, and Indonesia are where we have some relations. But when we think about what would be the area that we can work together, there are two. First, it's about the climate justice, the stake or the interest of the local communities. Some of the issues might be overlapping. So first, about the climate justice, country A, when they export something to like a country B, when they have like an imperialistic or imbalance in the power between the two countries. For example, let's say the Australia is trying to block the export of the coal to Korea, then we have to work at a local level to have like a fight or struggle. And to stop the Korean company to build a coal power plant in Vietnam, we have to work with the local communities as well. So, like outsourcing this kind of the coal plant or the damage from this whole climate justice should be also handled together. And what I may not be able to cover in today's presentation is about the localism. I mean, this could be covered later in a broader discussion when you have a follow-up discussion in a more integrated and comprehensive discussion that will be for the future discussion. And the second is about the interest of the local communities. One thing is that the local communities, for example, we have like a Korea, China, and Japan. They work on this particulate matter with this joint research, and we can work together to find a solution. It's not about who is causing and which is suffering from the damage, but it's really about how we can work together to build a better future, and that will be the most or the better focus. And we are like a neighboring countries, but sometimes we cannot work together. For example, about Japan's climate movement or Chinese climate activists, we have little knowledge and we are not really that much interested in our neighboring countries in terms of the climate activism. Then that will be something we have to work on in the future. So this is what I covered before, and also the differing interest between the three neighboring countries. And now let me share with you my personal experience and why I came to be more interested in this whole international solidarity and what I want to achieve. Well, I think this whole international exchange was one of my interest area. I wanted to like network and hang with the people from the other countries, and that's what I liked. And in my college, I mean, I mostly hanged out with this international students, and it's not just that. I mean, I felt the need for more international solidarity. That's and the real trigger was in August. We had this international program that I attended and went to the U.S. and the 10 activists went there to the U.S. And now the 10 activists from the U.S. are now in Korea for 2 weeks. They are now traveling around the country to meet with this whole activist and policy makers, and they are now in the program. Well, as I work with these people, I feel we are connected. I mean, they are from other countries and they are interested in our own country's problems. It's really make me feel very passionate, and we can work together for the common goal, and that really makes me inspired. And there's another thing about the whole trigger. Korea, like 90% of the energy sources are imported from other countries, and most of them are like a fossil fuels. I think that is the biggest issue for Korea. So we have to work at an international solidarity level to stop this export and import of the energy sources from the Russia, importing the coal or exporting the coal. I mean, the activists of the two countries have to work together. Otherwise, we may not have the right understanding on the supply chain of these two countries, and also we may not have the right understanding on this, like the whole resource mining and extraction. So we have to have the right level of the international solidarity to tackle these issues. And also, I think having this relationship with the other countries in activist relationship is really important. As I mentioned before, I love this international networking, but you should have this whole friendship and relationship in place and build a trust, not just to sharing the emails. I mean, you can do business by just to sharing emails, but if you have trust and friendship and solidarity, then you will see the real problem and what discourse you can build together and what word we can make together. And you can also see the whole real context of the problem. And along the way, you can also have better understanding about the culture in a free and informal settings. And that's also really important. You can listen to the other people and their countries and what they are doing, and what kind of the ecological sensitivity, and what about their like the ideas about this whole race and the biodiversity, and you can learn about this whole context that are hidden from the news articles, and you can have a clear understanding and also find the context from projects and programs, but also you can work the other way, and by understanding them better, you can see the problems and the projects that you can work on. So I hope, I mean, we have these colleagues and for the shared goals, and we are fighting for the same cause, and that really helped me to get energized and motivated. And in Korea, let's say we have a one activist arrested, then we can issue some statements in the other countries in show of like the solidarity, and that will help us to work on these actions, and that will make us stronger and more powerful. That's also a good strategy and good approach. And one last message. This is from Zero Hour. That is their posting. That we are the ones that we have been waiting for. So we should take the lead. And the essence of this international solidarity is that we should not be bound by these national boundaries. We can build this network on our own. So far, we try to think about how we can be engaged in the international events only, but that's not what really matters. We don't want to rely on the power of these whole systems, but we can use that. But also, we have to be away from this whole political influences. We have to build the world that we want. We have to work on our own. That should be the starting point of the international solidarity, and that will be not the public or the private diplomacy, but it will be some new kind of the diplomacy and international solidarity. We are not just advocating the national interest. We are working for a global cause for the whole world and for the whole planet, and that will be really key part. And last but not least, before closing my presentation, I want to tell you this: we are living on the same planet, so we should not be trapped by this whole geographic boundary. That will be only half of the solution. So I want you to get away from these geographical limitations and work together with these international activists and learn from them and work together in solidarity. And that's what we have to do as young activists. Thank you so much.
네, 지영님 발표 잘 들었습니다.
Thank you very much. Listening to your presentation, I felt why international solidarity is really necessary and why I became interested in international solidarity. And in the interest of time, let me move on to the next speaker. Marlow Baines has been working for Earth Guardians for the last 5 years. She got lots of experience and knowledge, and she's going to tell us everyone in a sustainable world. Now, the floor is yours. Please share your screen and begin your presentation.
Hi, everyone. Are you all ready? Mother of three looked at me, but don't you feel hopeless? Again, I try to explain that my sphere gives me inspiration, continuation, and compassion. But how will it change? Her voice desperate. Hope had flown years ago, deflated from years of waiting. Maybe a gaping hole left by her colleagues' intelligence. Climate depression wiggled so far in her mind, I know her mind was flailing for answers. Words swimming behind her eyes. Optimism of a silly girl who doesn't understand the world. And I felt angry at the people who had made this mother feel this way, angry at my grandfather's belittling. Boomer, millennial, what's the difference? Seeming hope, joy, spirit skipped a few generations, drowning our mothers and fathers without it. Trapped in a corner, a sad, lonely wolf, comforting this mother, I felt so helpless. Well, if it doesn't work, the systems will have to be brought down, I said. To blood in the streets, her voice high. I don't know. I only know that my world gives me hope, and it might be stupid, blind hope, but it is what keeps me hoping. I can only be myself, more compassionate, inspire some people, and continue to build a better world. And maybe it won't be enough. And the 3 daughters of the mother won't live past 17, and it was all for nothing? My life a failure that never made anything? Why? Why dwell on the fear that is fed to us in pretty silver bottles, pumped into our veins, infused sedation, fear? I never lived for this cowardly reality. Somehow it is my voice that is my superpower, so I organize, write, speak, teach, in turn, listen, reflect. Try hard to change what needs to change, because this climate is a psychological game of how fast humans can obtain a mental evolution. 8 years, my life's only meaning, working on the human solution. The mother walked away to throw her ice cream away. Chilly chicken skin chilled my skin. Sitting down in the dark, she says, I'm so grateful that you came. I think you woke up all those old white people. You give me hope, Marlow, belief that our world can actually be saved. And her eyes lit with little watery stars swimming behind. It almost felt like her hope had been awakened. Victim deciding to become a healing survivor. Fear tried draining us, but the light overcame always, over and over again. But I'm drained from the experience, so tired of this society dividing more and more for power. My stomach's clenched, I'm draining quick. How does our world have such a juxtaposition from light and dark, so easily persuaded to succumb to the darkness? Mine can't withstand this pessimism. I know this was never her intent. Silver stunted daggers bare from my chest. How do I wield them for good? Use this mother's worry thrown to a younger generation, so weary they wiped their hands and gave us their blessing. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, People for Earth, and Soyoung for inviting me today. My name is Marlow Baines. I'm a poet, facilitator, and leader, and I work with the organization Earth Guardians. Now I'm here today to talk about solidarity, my personal story, community organizing, and how we can work together across oceans and mountains. So lesson number 1. We need to learn to breathe through the discomfort. I don't know about you, but my week has been long, so I would like to invite you to get fully present with me by taking a few deep breaths. As you feel comfortable, feel free to close your eyes, feel your body in your seat, and breathe out. Breathe in, pause, breathe out. Breathe in, pause, breathe out. And on this final breath, breathe in. I want you to think about how 100% of our air that we breathe comes from our forests, oceans, and waterways. Breathe out. And what we contribute back in our exhale. When you're ready, feel free to open your eyes. I grew up within and immersed in nature, learning that cryptobiotic soil was a living organism and to respect the land below my feet. And my mother used pine cones and stones to teach me the basic principles of mathematics. Nature was my teacher and my classroom. And when I was in first grade, I wanted to start a nature club because my friends and I had planted seeds and talked about how fun it would be to get together, watch our plants grow and play among them. And this is my earliest memory of cultivating a connection between community and nature. And as I entered into fourth grade, I moved to a new home in Boulder, Colorado. My mom got involved with the local anti-fracking movement, and I started watching documentaries about far-off places where polar caps were melting and polar bears were losing their home. I learned that Colorado, the state in which I live, was positioned itself to become a top producer of crude oil and natural gas. And during this time, there was a song that was a favorite of mine and my brother's. And there's a line that goes, "Be the change that you want to see in the world," just like Gandhi. And I remember thinking, silly adults, don't they know that they need to be the change? Why are they so worried about this crisis if we're the ones causing it? And I knew I wanted to be a part of that change, but I was 10 years old. thinking that the climate crisis wouldn't be an issue much longer. And then in 6th grade, do you all remember 6th grade, or around that time when you're 10 or 12 years old, 12 to 13 years old? During my 6th grade year, there was a flood along the Front Range of Colorado, what was later called a 1,000-year flood, and it felt like the rains were trying to wash something away. All of a sudden, climate change was so forward-facing, going from wildfires to floods like a ricochet that left me unsteady. What a strange reality, we all said, as we watched the foothills become waterfalls. Now, what a strange and surreal feeling, feeling petrified about what's going on and still wanting to do something about it. But what is the thing that finally propels us into action? Now, mine began in the fall of 9th grade, the month before the US 2016 election, and I stood on the hill between the Osheti-Shikoe Water Protectors Camp and the Dakota Access Pipeline. Now, for those of you who don't know the Dakota Access Pipeline, this pipeline was originally routed north of Bismarck, which is a predominantly white city in the United States. White residents were worried about their water being contaminated, and so the pipeline was routed further south, adjacent to the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. Despite the same questions being raised on the reservation, this time the pipeline's route didn't change, and so people gathered together. They stood for one another, for culture, for land, for water. And so as I stood on this hill, on one hand, the earth cut in this ugly line through the rich, dark soil, I stood between the two dualities of our current reality. Humanity collaborating and competing for land and resources that should be respected. So I remember sitting in my math class, which had no windows, just fluorescent lights in the bowels of the school, and I felt rage so deep that I knew I was faced with another choice. It was the rage that no one with their political power had stopped the pipeline from being built or stopped private security officers from brutalizing water protectors. These blatantly racist systems wouldn't stop the climate crisis from coming, and I, a 14-year-old girl in the middle of math class, had to do something. Get off my ass and do it. And then all of a sudden, these pieces started clicking into place, that it didn't take anything special to do and be a part of the change. Be the change. I want to be a part of the change. The change begins with me. So I applied to be on the Earth Guardians Rise Youth Council and attended our youth leadership training and was accepted. Now, Earth Guardians trains and empowers youth to become effective leaders at the intersection of environmental and social justice. In 1994, Earth Guardians was founded as a community resource center for high school students to learn and be empowered to take action for the earth. 30 years later, we have become a global organization with youth leaders from Asia, Africa, Europe, the Americas, and the Pacific Islands. Earth Guardians takes two approaches to supporting our generation of youth leaders: by training them to become leaders and then empowering youth leaders to step into leadership positions to positively impact our communities. Now, how do you all learn from Earth Guardians? And how do we work together? What does our solidarity look like? All of our local actions across the globe are imperative to our collective work to create a more just and sustainable world. And I believe that if we all continue to do work in our own communities, get involved, advocate, and then share our community stories across the globe with others, our connection to one another is going to uplift and empower our work. So keep doing what you're doing in your communities. And if you aren't involved yet or are scared to, find ways to connect with them, and then connect with global networks. Utilize the tools and skills that are out there. And as someone who works behind the scenes at a relatively large organization, all I wanted to do is support leaders, grassroots leaders, the leaders who are on the grounds. And as someone who has worked in community organizing, the hardest and most powerful way to connect with these organizations is just simply reaching out. So ask to learn more, ask for support, and figure out ways that are creative to collaborate and work together. Now, I know right now you all can join one initiative that Earth Guardians and youth leaders across the globe are working on currently. On November 12th, there's going to be a global day of action, and this action is called Choose Action Now. It's inspired by the global climate strike movement, but we're taking the same energy of collective striking and transforming it into direct action and climate solutions. The goal of this campaign is to highlight, uplift, and empower grassroots leads to plan a day of action on November 12th to show the world what people are doing to combat the climate crisis now. The Earth Guardians team chose November 12th with a greater strategy in mind. The date takes place right in the middle of COP27. And stated on the UN website, the 27th Conference of the Parties, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, COP27, will build on the outcomes of COP26 to deliver action on an array of issues critical to tackling the climate emergency. Now, as youth leaders, we are hesitant and skeptical to believe this statement, although it would be amazing and I hope that it happens. So instead, we have created Choose Action Now to put the spotlight back on individuals' hands that have already been solving the climate problems daily and give power back to local and grassroots communities. At the same time, we are demanding world leaders take action now, stated clearly in a platform of demands written by a coalition of youth-led organizations. We wanted to create an initiative that anyone, anywhere can take part of and during COP27. We've waited 27 years, longer than my lifetime, to take action, and still no action by our world leaders has arguably been taken. This campaign is for everyone who is sick and ready to take action. Now, we have a global reach. We have the power, and this goes beyond just my country in North America, but to our global communities. We're focused on empowering and highlighting the work being done by those that are most affected by the climate crisis. And we're centering people who have the knowledge, tools, and influence that they are using to create our desired future. We are creating the platform to execute our collective dream. Currently, 50 actions are scheduled to happen on November 12th in 21 different countries from the United States to Nigeria, Pakistan, and Zimbabwe. And we need one in Korea. So if you're interested in signing up, please visit our website, earthguardian.can. And as I was thinking about what solidarity means, I came up with a few top tips that I wanted to share with everyone. The first is actively listen to those who share different life experiences and skills than you. The second is learn and reach for support from your peers and mentors. The third is dream up your best future and work towards it. The fourth, as Brene Brown says, we must call an end to shame and guilt as tools for change. They will never be effective. And instead use active empathy to understand how we can better collaborate. Celebrate your successes, however small or large. And finally, this movement and this work is taxing. So please, and I say this to myself as well, take breaks and spend time outside in green spaces, because it's not only good for our planet, but it's also good for us. And take care of yourselves. Our dream is to build a better world that expands from my country to yours. Let us build together to work and build a supportive network so none of us feel alone. And remember that it is already happening. So before I end and we get to the discussion after our final speaker, I would like to close with an excerpt from my poetry book. This comes from the poem, The Final Exposition. So yes, our countries look different in numbers, names, and social statistics, but I see my country and cry for the pain never felt by the economist, president, politician, and billionaire. Yes, people are angry and turning words into action, called inspiration, handed as flowers to the girl who feels like giving up in the back of an underpaid teacher's classroom. Yes, systems are failing, and that means renovation. Stop being scared of death, because rebirth is a part of a millennia-old system. And I'm awakened by the sky color turned dark, born into light that turns into gold, that showers the earth in a sigh of relief, because emotions are a cycle causing all of us to be human, and nature is loving. So yes, We are waking up in masses of poppy fields that wink black eyes of beauty, interconnected like stars sprinkled in a galaxy far on another island. We are different and yet similarly perfect in imperfect cohesion. My country hurts because maybe it has a disease that they don't want us to treat, but we, the people, can acknowledge the trauma. Be the blood, nerves, and brain to knit it back together. Our people imagine a country. Now, isn't that lovely? The idea of a competition deconstructed into ideas that are made into minds that can change and call for facilitated collaboration. And one day he'll ask me what I think about politics in my country, and I'll say, our borders are under reconstruction because we've only imagined them so we can change them. All things being equal, something so revolutionary that they call it the evolution of consciousness. And the whole time we finally realized that people were in power and that human means keeping our piece of space clean and healthy. And we've done it. Every night I will go to sleep mystified by the sacred soul that holds our beings. That youth did it, adults helped us, and nature bounded and leaped with us. I will weep in this man's presence as I greet him as another human being. I'm back in the current moment, and he says, your country is perfect. And I smile because I know it isn't, so I say, we are human. Therefore, what is a country? And I get back to work smiling because we are creating change globally. So now, what are we going to do after today? Thank you all.
Thank you very much for the beautiful presentation and beautiful poetry. And she said we should focus on the leap forward rather than focus on the darkness. We should be able to find out the hope. That was the bright message. Thank you very much.
And let me introduce the last presenter. Last presenter is working with a different youth organization, and he's very active. And Jamie Minden, and she will talk about the climate action now, movement strategy, and international coordination. Floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. It's nice to meet you all. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jamie, and I'll be sharing my screen. So today I'm going to talk about movement strategy and international coordination. So first, I'm just going to say a few words about my beginnings. I'm from California in the Bay Area, and my entire life, I've seen nothing but drought in the place that I call home. One of the pictures here is from California and the other is from Korea. So, as you all know, we are experiencing very similar effects of the climate crisis, but I just wanted to ground us in that. So I started out my climate advocacy when I was very young. I grew up in a region devastated by drought, and so I was very frustrated at the inaction in the region and in my country, and so I knew I wanted to make a change. I started speaking at city council meetings when I was 14, organizing climate strikes. I united the youth in my area under Silicon Valley Sunrise and moved to DC for college, where I'm organizing currently 0 Hour. So to get that out of the way, first, I'm just going to talk about the basics of what a movement does. I'm sure all of you know this. I just want to ground us in the same on the same space. So first of all, a movement gets a constituency to agree that there is a problem. It gets the constituency to agree upon the same solution. So for example, in the US, we've been working a lot on pressuring for a Green New Deal and climate legislation. And finally, a movement forces the institution to act. So in order to force an institution to act, there are different leverages of power. In the United States, most political power either comes from money or people power. There's a lot of money in our politics, and unfortunately makes it very difficult for grassroots lobbying to be successful. And so in order for our grassroots lobbying to make a big difference, we have to mobilize a mass movement of people. So this is called the spectrum of support, what you see in front of you. On one side, we have active opposition, that's the dark purple. Someone who's in active opposition of the climate movement, maybe doesn't believe in the climate crisis or works for an oil company or something like that, is actively working against our goals. On the other side, we have active allies, people like us, people like you and I, who are fighting for climate justice and fighting to stop the climate crisis. And then, as you can see, throughout this spectrum, we have people on different edges of the scale. We have passive allies, people who are not taking action, but believe in the climate crisis, believe in climate solutions. We have passive opposition, people who aren't taking action necessarily to perpetuate the climate crisis, but people who are standing on the side of inaction. And we also have people who are in the middle and are neutral. So this, as we are taking action in movement, it's very important that we move people on the spectrum of support from passive allies to active allies, or from neutral to passive allies, trying to move people towards our side of the spectrum so we have more people taking action on the climate crisis. And then one thing to recognize from this spectrum of support is that it's very difficult to move people from active opposition or passive opposition all the way over to being allies. So we've learned in the climate movement in the US to not worry about that, to not worry about trying to change the minds of people who are CEOs of fossil fuel companies, not trying to change the minds of people who don't believe in the climate crisis. The science is out there. Most people believe in it in the country now. And so really we're trying to focus on bringing people who aren't taking action but are on our side and mobilizing them to take action, because it's a lot more effective. And so in order to do this, we use moral protest, which is nonviolent action that brings the truth of the crisis into the eyes of the public and forces people to pick a side. As youth, we have a big advantage in moral protest because youth don't take action a lot, and when we do, it's something that really affects us and something that really matters to everyone. If a child has to take action on something, it's something that's very important to all of society. And so things like climate strikes and actions run by youth have been very effective forms of moral protest, because people can very clearly see that this is an issue that everyone needs to be worried about if a child is worried about it. And so effective moral protest does four main things. It targets the public, so it's not targeted necessarily at changing the minds of government officials. It's targeted at changing the minds of the public and forcing them to take action and become active allies. Secondly, it connects to commonly held values. For example, the people we love, the places we call home. Nobody wants to see their family members get hurt by environmental disaster. So connecting to values that everyone shares is a very important part of moral protest. Moral protest, thirdly, makes the public choose a side, causing movement on the spectrum of support. So like I said previously, turning passive allies into active ones, turning neutral people into passive allies. And finally, moral protest escalates by increasing participation, sacrifice, and disruption throughout actions. So you might start out with a march on a Saturday, and then you move into, you bring people in from that march and you recruit them and you train them, and then you bring them into maybe striking. So that's an up level of sacrifice of, you're striking from work or school. So you're sacrificing your day, and it's just, increasing disruption, and you move up from there. And by the way, I would just like to take a moment to give credit. I've been a Sunriser for a long time. I also work for 0 Hour. I'm representing 0 Hour in this space, but a lot of the ideas I'm talking about right now, I learned from Sunrise. So I'd like to give credit to that. This is not 0 Hour's message that I'm necessarily drawing from. This is also from my work with Sunrise. So next, I'd like to talk about where our power lies. As I previously mentioned, in the US, there's a lot of money in politics. So we have to really mobilize people in order to get effective change. So we are most powerful when we prove that millions of people are on our side. So example, through striking, through marching, showcasing our numbers, petitions, elections, really forcing public figures to come to terms with public opinion. Next, we show our power when we clearly present the narrative of the struggle. So public narrative is very important in this fight. So when we talk about who we are, when we present ourselves as relatable to the public, when we present ourselves as people who have shared values with a lot of people out there, what we're fighting for, what we're up against. When we create that narrative, it really helps bring people on our side because they realize that we don't have like some crazy political agenda. We're just trying to survive and make this planet livable for the next generation. And finally, we are powerful when we force the public to pick a side, as they already mentioned, through moral protest, moving people along the spectrum of support. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about political common sense and some history in America. So this is an image of a mural made in Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. The New Deal began in the 1930s, and it was very effective at getting people jobs, getting people healthcare, and it changed the political common sense. People were destitute and starving, and so they needed a New Deal to bring them back into economic prosperity. And it is worth mentioning that there are a lot of justice issues with the New Deal in the past. The opportunities that were available to white Americans in the New Deal were not available to people of color in America. So that is very important to note. So during the New Deal, the second Bill of Rights was proposed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and it was very popular. It stated that every American has the right to a job, an adequate wage and decent living, a decent home, medical care, economic protection during illness, accident, old age, or unemployment, and a good education. And if you've spent any time in America recently, you know, in the past 50 years, you'll know that this would never fly today. This is not popular. This would be absurd and far left in the eyes of Americans today. But back in the 1930s, this was the political common sense. This is a quote from President Eisenhower, American president in the 1950s. He said, "Should any political party attempt to abolish Social Security, unemployment insurance, and eliminate labor laws and farm programs, you would not hear of that party again in our political history." That is very powerful as a statement because that is what has happened in America. And the parties that are doing these things are very, very prominent. And so it's just very interesting how the political common sense has changed. And the way that this occurred is during the Reagan era, Reaganomics took hold of Americans. Inflation was rising and people were looking for a solution, and Reagan and the Republican Party came in and pitched some things and changed the political common sense in America. They pushed neoliberal trade deals. They added a negative connotation to the social safety net, so people stopped believing that the social safety net was good. They increased military spending. They increased environmental policy rollback. They introduced mass incarceration, the war on drugs, increased wealth inequality, caused a lot of harm to communities in America. So it's looking back at that history helps us understand how political common sense can be changed. And the place we're in now, at least the place we were in before the Trump administration, was solely centered in Reaganomics. We were still very much in that state of mind. Things have changed quite a bit in the past few years. In 2018, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ed Markey, two of our Congress members, introduced the Green New Deal, and it caught on among a lot of young people and old people alike. However, the conservatives were very afraid of this idea because they knew that it was something that could win. So as you can see in the picture in the middle, they spent lots and lots of media time and money on trying to discredit the Green New Deal. And it worked a lot. It worked very well for a long time. However, activists had to overcome this. People kept fighting to change the political common sense through moral protest, through the spectrum of support. And by the time we got to the 2020 election, things had changed quite a bit. Back in 2018, when the Green New Deal was proposed, it was basically political suicide for a moderate Democratic candidate to be pro-Green New Deal. But by the time we got to 2020, just 2 years later, for the presidential election, we had done enough political work for Joe Biden, a very moderate Democratic candidate, to have a proposed climate policy that basically instilled, tenets of the Green New Deal. And founders of climate movements such as Varshini Prakash, founder of Sunrise, were at the table in writing this climate policy. Joe Biden has not actually gone forward with a lot of this stuff, but it's very telling that that was the political common sense that could help him win an election. And so all of that in mind, when thinking about strategy for climate action, it's very important to keep in mind the social, political, and economic forces that affect your community and your nation. In Europe, the Fridays for Future Friday climate strikes were very, very successful. The picture on the bottom here shows a climate strike in Europe. They were incredibly successful. People of all ages showed up, not just school children, because people could. There was the social safety net in place, and it still is, that allows people to leave work for a day or take a sick day. And in America, that is simply not the case. People don't have the right to sick days. People don't have the right to leave work as easily. And even if you do have the right to do that or the ability, it is very, very difficult to take a day off in our world without a social safety net. A lot of people can't afford it. And so I was really encouraged to hear actually that you in Korea in September had a strike on Saturday instead of Friday. And it was very successful. So I applaud you for that. That was very smart. Another thing to keep in mind, at least about America, and I'm sure that you have more context about what's going on in Korea that you could apply this to. But in America, as I said before, we have a lot of money in politics. So we really have to look at our sources of power and leverage. One person striking for climate every Friday, like Greta Thunberg did, would not make that big of a difference here in America. I know, because we tried. Because money in politics is a much more important factor for politicians than people power until we get mass numbers of people in the streets. So just to overview, these are the three things movements do, and movements do them by setting collective goals and building campaigns, building public support through relational organizing and moral protest. Relational organizing, I forgot to mention, is connecting with people in person, which is really difficult during the pandemic, but really having face-to-face interactions and building community within organizers. And then finally, they do them by power mapping, which is another way of saying strategy, and targeting decision makers to deliver on public demands. So I know I'm short on time, but I will go very quickly. So I do work for Zero Hour. I'm a policy analyst, and I'm currently an interim organizing lead until we get a new one in place. And so here are a few things we do. We do a lot of political endorsements, both in the US and abroad, but I'm on the US national team, so I focus on the US, but these are some people we've supported. We do a lot of national policy advocacy and advocacy for environmental justice. We are active coalition partners with frontline communities, such as the Indigenous-led People versus Fossil Fuels Coalition and Stop the Money Pipeline. This picture below is a picture of a protest last year I was at with People versus Fossil Fuels, an Indigenous-led group. We also plan actions ourselves. This is an action from 2018, one of our first climate strikes at the White House. And then we go to quite a few international climate conferences. We always have several Zero Hour members supporting us, or representing us at COP. We also have international diplomacy pressure coalition organizing. I have been doing a lot of work around loss and damages and climate reparations, as well as US State Department pressure. And finally, our organizers regularly work on UN youth initiatives serving on Youngo, the youth constituency of the UNFCCC. Next, you might be interested to hear about Zero Hour Southeast Asia. We have ambassadors in Southeast Asia from the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Pakistan, India, China, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Our most active chapter is in the Philippines, and we have some very amazing, incredible organizers in the Philippines that are working. Zero Hour Southeast Asia also partners with several organizations. If you're interested in partnering with us, I have more information on you for that. But we partner with local groups such as Fridays for Future chapters, Climate Strike Thailand, Extinction Rebellion chapters, etc. And one thing to note is that organizing in the Philippines has been particularly difficult given the political situation. So the current campaigns are centered around education and plastic reduction. Our organizers quite literally put their lives at risk organizing in the Philippines because of the dictatorship and the anti-terrorism bill there that targets activists. So they're in a very, very difficult position. So I'm sorry, I'm not able to share as much information as I would like to about Zero Hour Philippines. But they also previously did amazing work organizing Zoom trainings, workshops, art exhibitions, conferences, local lobbying, and relief across the Philippines. So if you're interested in creating a Zero Hour South Korea chapter, I would love to work with you. Or if you're interested in partnering with Zero Hour Southeast Asia, I will meet with you to help you begin or help you connect with our Southeast Asia partners. This is the form. I can share it with people after this presentation as well. It's bit.ly/ZH for Zero Hour chapter. I will share that again later, but if you fill out this form, I will reach out to you. So please do. I would love to work with you. And then finally, I would love to talk more with you about which issues we might be jointly interested in on international cooperation. These are a few I could come up with, but I would love to work with you all on climate protests to change the global political common sense, especially if we were able to bring back the climate strikes on the scale that they were in 2019. The pandemic really threw a wrench in climate striking because relational organizing and in-person striking was so hindered. But I really hope that we can bring that back. Also, COP27 and other international diplomacy events would be a great place to collaborate, especially because we would be moving across borders, so we could really meet in person. Collaborating regionally, of course, with Zero Southeast Asia would be amazing, as well as leveraging our shared power by hosting joint strategy sessions, sort of like the one we're doing now. And finally, climate justice in our nations and internationally is definitely something we all seem to be in agreement on. So I've got some discussion questions here. I'm not exactly sure where we would like to go from here, but I will stop screen sharing. And thank you so much for having me today. It's been an honor.
네, 재미 구체적인 전략과 경험에 대해서
Thank you very much for sharing the detailed experience. I wish I had more time. And we can move on to Q&A and closing comments. And before that, we have some international students who are gathered here today. And from Asia Women's University, we have 3 students. And could you introduce yourself, if you don't mind? And let me pass the microphone over to you. So listening to the presentation, please tell us how you felt.
Hello, this is Shirina, and currently I'm working at Soyoung University as a postdoctoral researcher. And my research focus is on inland waters and how pollution and other anthropogenic activities affect the inland waters. So I could really relate to the discussions we had today, because even though I'm not directly working with policy making, but whatever I find out from my research is always a recommendation for the policymakers to make some changes for the betterment of the river and environment. So it was very interesting to listen to all the discussions. I had a good time. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Kamala Kesi and I'm from Nepal. Currently I'm working at SNL Partners, and even though it's a law firm, we have also, I'm not sure if you are aware, but we have filed a lawsuit against Korean government for issues related to climate. So we are definitely, I am part of this climate issue, and I think very highly of like how it is very important for young generations like us to really start thinking about how we can make the change the things better. So I was really glad to hear all the perspectives and how a lot of organizations in Korea and around the globe are fighting against making things better to make things better in the earth. So thank you so much, and it was nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and good morning. So my name is Zahra and I'm from Afghanistan. So it's very good to meet you all here. So for me, environmental rights are some, what is it called, new human rights. And as I call myself a human rights, to be a new human rights activist. And so I feel like I urge to be part of this fight maybe in the coming future upon my graduation from university. So I feel like to be able to have a very profound ground for the whole humanity to survive in this crisis is to build the solidarity, and it happens if we all can work together. And I'm so happy that I'm seeing so many people in here today that they really want to be part of the change, and I would be delighted to stay connected and work with you all in the future. Thank you so much for having me today.
네, 소개 감사드립니다.
Thank you very much. And even though that was a sudden request, thank you very much for the kind introduction. As we were discussing so many topics and we are running out of the time, so I would like to open the floor if there is any comments from the floor, if you have any question or any suggestion about better solidarity for the international activities. And please raise your hand if you have any question or comment.
네, 쉽지 않은 주제이기 때문에 생각이 많이
I know this is a difficult topic.
그럼 지영님께서 먼저 해외 연사분들의 발표를
And Jihyuk, what do you think about it? And could you make your comment on this?
일단 오늘 사실 토론에서 이제 저희가 세 명의 발제를 듣고
And we listened to your presentation. Actually, there is nothing much to discuss.
Marlow, I gotta say, Marlow, your poetry was lit. 그래서 그 말로의 그 뭐지 시 낭송을 딱 들었을 때
And when I listened to Marlow's poetry,
아 이런 식으로 우리가 얘기를 해야겠구나.
and I felt this is the way we should deliver our speech
갖춰서 이게 좀더 이제
in a very formal way.
좀더 영적인 부분, 그러니까
And we can talk about spirituality rather than just about the academic one. And we can break the formality and we can make a new approach. And thank you very much for the inspiration.
어쨌든 연대란 무엇이냐.
Anyway,
아까 이제
regarding the definition of solidarity, we should have emotional interaction. We want to do something together. That kind of attitude can be the starting point.
이끌어내냐라고 했을 때
And how we can make that happen is really important. And in that regard, and this session gives us the opportunity to be connected.
학술적인 내용 얘기를 얘기하는 것보다는
And rather than talking about the academic stuff, and I can deliver my story so that we can have some kind of empathy and find out the common ground.
그리고 이제 제이미 발제도 굉장히 잘 들었고
And also thank you, Jamie, for your great presentation and about the New Deal and the history and the political common sense. I mean, the 0 hour and what you have been doing and in Northeast Asia. Thank you for the presentation. And I think the two presenters also want to do something, I mean, with the Korean chapter, with the Earth Guardian and 0 hour, maybe we have to work together, right? We have to build something as a Korean chapter of the Earth Guardian and 0 hour, maybe. So, I mean, we're gonna have a separate, we have separate like a chatting room on the social media, so we can work from there, right? Yes, right. We are now having the interpretation service, so they will understand. So last but not least, we want to hear from Jamie and Marlow a few closing words.
I think events like this.
Marlow first.
I think events like this shows the power that we have as a collective and global community, that we're not alone and that this work is happening all across the globe. And I hope to hear from you all so that we can collaborate more together. What you all are working on in Korea and what we are working on here in the United States may be different, but the tools and the resources and the strategies that we're using, we can learn from one another and be able to implement even more effective campaigns and programs in the future. So please feel free to reach out. If there's a way to share links in the future, I can share our social medias or our website. But other than that, continue on. Remember that action starts with us and that it's occurring, it's happening now. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And next, Jamie. Jamie, closing words, please.
Yeah, I would also just like to say thank you for having me. It's been really an honor, and I've been so inspired by everything you've had to say so far. It's given me a lot of hope. So thank you so much for having me. And I really do sincerely hope we can work together in the future. I've been very impressed with your programs, and please reach out. I can share my email or outreach information with folks here so that we can get in further contact. But I feel like we're at a turning point right now in history. I feel like we've reached a level of environmental destruction internationally and climate action, and it's evening out a little bit, so that we're getting to the point where we're reaching a breaking point here. So I'm really hoping that we can work together and break through as one. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And thank you for being with us. And also, one last comment.
So there can be big changes or the small changes, but in the process, we can be together. We can go hand in hand, and we can listen to each other carefully, and we can look into the eyes. Then we can go far away together. We talked about the international solidarity and climate justice. And this is the conclusion of the day 3 on all those 3 days. And many people made a lot of efforts. Thank you very much for making this event possible. I would like to thank you for your participation. And now we can have a better international solidarity. This concludes all the session. Thank you very much. Thank you.